Here is a fun scenario. You are part of a political think tank in a nation rivaling the United States. Let's say a nondescript country somewhere in Asia. You are tasked with creating plans to disrupt the US government's political operations. So what will you do? Will you bribe, lobby American politicians with millions of dollars to push harmful policies? Will you indirectly undermine the US by using proxy groups similar to Iran's strategy? Or perhaps you will spend money to incite unrest on the streets, like what happened during the anti-ICE movement? Or maybe you'll choose something far simpler, but surprisingly effective. Just sit back, relax, drink some tea, and watch the US government shut itself down. From October 1st, 2025 to November 12th, the federal government of the United States was shut down because Congress failed to pass funding legislation for the 2026 fiscal year. The Republican-controlled House of Representatives advanced a continuing resolution, but Senate Democrats repeatedly blocked it. The legislation failed 14 times before a revised appropriations bill finally passed on November 10th. On November 12th, the House passed the Senate's revised bill, and President Donald Trump signed it the same day. This shutdown, the 11th in U.S. history, was also the longest, lasting 42 days. For an ordinary person who doesn't follow politics closely, this can be confusing. How can the government of the world's most powerful nation simply shut down? And what does that even mean? Do the military and police stop working? What happens to government websites and services? Do they still function during a shutdown? In short, a U.S. government shutdown happens when the two major political parties cannot agree on funding allocations. This gridlock prevents the government from paying its workers and operating its services. But don't worry. Only regular people are affected. Federal employees and soldiers stop receiving paychecks. Meanwhile, those hardworking members of Congress, they continue receiving their salaries in full. The average member earns $174,000 a year. Don't you just love it when the political elite make mistakes and only ordinary citizens suffer the consequences? In this video, I'm going to talk about the U.S. government shutdown. First, I'll give some context. Are shutdowns normal for a country, or is it uniquely an American phenomenon? Then I'll explain how the U.S. government can shut down, hurting its citizens but not its political elite, and finally, how these shutdowns end, often in an anticlimactic fashion. Let's start with some context. Do other countries experience government shutdowns? The answer is mostly no. Even during wartime, most governments continue operating, even when under missile or drone attack. So what makes the U.S. different? In 1980, the Attorney General under President Jimmy Carter issued a narrow interpretation of the 1884 Anti-Deficiency Act. This 19th century spending law prohibits the government from entering into contracts without congressional approval. For nearly a century, when budget gaps occurred, the government allowed essential spending to continue. But after 1980, the legal interpretation changed dramatically. No budget, no spending. In other countries, even when no agreement is reached, the government simply defaults to the previous year's budget. This is because the lights still need to stay on, and refusing to pay people for doing their jobs would be absurd. But of course, this is the United States, and its definition of absurd is rather different from the rest of the world's. The first U.S. government shutdown occurred shortly after this policy change, in 1981, when President Ronald Reagan vetoed a funding bill. It lasted only a few days. Since then, there have been at least 11 more shutdowns that forced government agencies to close their doors, lasting anywhere from half a day to more than a month. The previous major shutdown, from December 21, 2018 to January 25, 2019, had been the longest on record. On December 11, 2018, President Trump held a televised meeting with Speaker-designate Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in the Oval Office. He asked them to support a $5.7 billion appropriation to fund a border wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. They refused, leading to a heated argument. During the tense exchange, Trump declared, "I am proud to shut down the government for border security. I will be the one to shut the government down. I'm not going to blame you for it. I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down." 10 days later, Trump blamed the Democrats for the impending shutdown, which was, strategically speaking, Quite a big brain move. The shutdown finally ended on January 25, 2019, when Trump agreed to a stopgap bill that reopened the government until February 15th to allow more time for negotiations. However, he reiterated his demand for border wall funding and warned that he would shut down the government again or declare a national emergency and redirect military funds if Congress did not allocate the money by February 15. With a veto-proof majority, both houses of Congress passed an appropriations bill on February 14th that included $1.375 billion for 55 miles of steel fencing along the border. After getting this partial funding, Trump was satisfied. Just kidding. The very next day, he declared a national emergency to secure more funding for the wall, since he was unhappy with what Congress had approved. Yet another big brain move. This demonstrated just how far political spite could stretch legal boundaries. But hey, this is the Wild West. We even have driver's licenses for people who can't read English road signs. Anything goes. The current shutdown, however, arose under different circumstances. On October 1st, 2025, the newest government shutdown began at midnight after the Senate rejected both the Republican-led House stopgap funding bill, which would have extended government funding through November 21, and a Democratic alternative continuing resolution that included healthcare subsidies. Neither bill reached the necessary threshold in the Senate, and efforts to prevent a shutdown failed. As a result, roughly 67,000 federal employees were furloughed. Another 730,000 were required to work without pay, and 1.3 million active duty troops, along with over 750,000 National Guard and Reserve personnel, were also obligated to serve without pay. And of course, the members of Congress who helped create this mess continued receiving their full salaries. Life is much easier when you're the one signing your own paycheck. In the days that followed, several Senate votes on funding bills failed repeatedly. As time went on, more and more federal employees were laid off or sent home. It turns out that when you stop paying people, they stop wanting to work. Shocking, I know. On day 18, October 18th, we saw the famous No King protest, which argued that the United States has no kings, or something like that. Their message was strange, but the protest certainly made headlines. By day 23, the Southwest Airlines Pilots Union, representing 11,000 members, called on Congress to get their act together. The Allied Pilots Association represents pilots, air traffic controllers, and TSA agents, many of whom had been working without pay. Then on day 32, November 1st, SNAP benefits finally stopped. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which provides food assistance to 1 in 8 Americans, came to a halt. And let's be honest, the United States is one of the most obese countries on Earth, yet 1/8 of its population needs the government to cover their meals? The math just doesn't add up, or maybe the government wants the population to stay overweight for some mysterious reason. Throughout this period, both sides continued blaming each other instead of working on a solution. The left accused Trump of being heartless and intentionally starving Americans, which, who knows, might reduce the obesity rate, but what do I know? Meanwhile, the right blamed the left for demanding what they viewed as excessive healthcare funding for undocumented immigrants. The drama dragged on until November 12th, when the House voted 222-209 to end the government shutdown. President Trump signed the bill that same day, officially bringing it to an end. As you can see, the shutdown was nothing more than a political spat over how to spend taxpayer money. And Congress took its sweet time resolving it because they still got paid while millions of regular people missed their paychecks. Naturally, this sparked outrage across the country, as it became painfully clear that the politicians couldn't even agree on something as basic as funding the government, literally their primary responsibility, while ordinary citizens suffered the most. So what happens next? Honestly, this cycle will likely continue. There will probably be more government shutdowns in the future. Shutdowns have become bargaining chips, tools for one side to force concessions from the other, or to pressure opponents into including specific funding items. To stop this ridiculous behavior, the law itself would need to change. But since members of Congress aren't personally harmed by shutdowns, it's unlikely they'll be motivated to act. There's also the political incentive. Shutdowns can rally supporters, allowing each side to blame the other. Regular people's hardships become bargaining chips, regardless of what the public actually wants. Hopefully, this practice can be stopped someday. For now, all we can do is watch as the political elite play games with taxpayer money while facing almost no consequences. That's all for today. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. See you next time.